Welcome to Shooting Straight with Brad and David. I'm David Klaus, your Navajo County Sheriff, and my partner.
I'm Brad Carline, your Navajo County Attorney.
And this month we're joined with Brian Swanee, the Chief Deputy for the Navajo County Sheriff's Office, and Jeff Sharp, Captain of Arizona Department of Public Safety. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Both have been regulars on the show before. Well, thank you for being here. We wanted to talk this month a little bit about DUIs and actually preventing DUIs and holiday patrols as we're approaching the holiday season. This month there's a lot of celebrations, a lot of things, a lot of gatherings. But traditionally we see a spike in DUI enforcement and arrests. What's behind that, Jeff?
So, as you said, there's always an increase during the holiday seasons. Everybody gets time off from work, spending time with their families, wanting to have a good time, which we understand. And in recognizing that, we deploy a couple different task force in this area, one being the White Mountain DUI Task Force, which primarily covers the south end of Navajo and Apache County. And then we have the Route 66 DUI Task Force, which is primarily located out of Winslow, but we've increased their efforts to go from the New Mexico state line to the California state line, including several different agencies. So that's our effort to increase the patrols to make sure everybody stays safe during the holidays.
Is the task force just DPS or is it other law enforcement agencies too?
That's a group of several different law enforcement agencies. We all recognize the need for increased patrols during this time of year, so we all come together under that task force to increase the DUI patrols.
Ryan, I know you've been around almost as long as I have. Weren't you involved early on in some of the DUI task force in Navajo County?
Yes, I was. The DUI task, the White Mountain DUI Task Force was kind of built during calendar year 2003 and got started in 2004. And that the White Mountain Task Force comprised of the Department of Public Safety, Navajo County Sheriff's Office, Show Low PD, Pine Top PD, and Snowflake PD initially. And then as it continued to grow over the next couple of years, Apache County Sheriff's Office, Springerville and Eager Police Departments, and the St. John's Police Department all joined in. So the Apache County folks would work task force operations over on their county, and then we would focus here in South County and Navajo County.
And I know that every year at this time, law enforcement actually publicizes that they're going to be out there in force. Some years doing checkpoints, some years not. Why do you publicize it?
The main objective for these task forces, like a checkpoint or a wolf pack detail or what have you, and advertising that is to deter people from making that decision. We announce it, hey, we're going to be out there, don't drink and drive, trying to get people to heed our warning. The goal as we go into these holiday weekends and these big weekends like this and holidays is 0 DUI arrests and 0 crashes more specifically.
You used a term that maybe many people aren't familiar with, wolf pack.
So wolf pack is everybody, you identify a target area and everybody kind of focuses in their efforts in that area. Whereas as a citizen driving through, say, Pine Top Lakeside, they see 4 different police cars with their lights flashing, and maybe that's going to help them make that decision not to drink and drive, is going to attack a certain area. And then later that night, they'll move to a different area. And just that's what you call just wolf pack, and everybody kind of works together and goes from one place to another.
I know we would all love to spend as much time as we could working on these, doing a wolf pack or a task force like that, but it takes overtime funding. It takes special equipment. Who's the big partners that help us make these type of operations possible?
So the biggest partner we have is the Governor's Office of Highway Safety. They provide additional funding to us every year, not just for DUI enforcement, but also speed, restraint, and distracted driving. So we use the GOH funds in addition to our regularly budgeted overtime.
Yeah, because like what Brian was describing, there's a whole squad of vehicles out there in addition to what we're already working, taking our regular calls for service. And it takes that additional funding from the state to make projects like that happen.
Right. A lot of times what we do is with that overtime funding that the captain's talking about is we can bring officers and deputies and troopers back out to work on their day off and work in an overtime status, focusing directly on DUI enforcement. And like you said, Sheriff, sometimes it's tough to go out and work DUI enforcement when the city officers or the troopers or the deputies are responding to regular calls for service. So we don't take away from those regular calls for service, we add to that. We add to the staffing.
So coming forward, I know GOHS does a lot of press releases. We do a lot here locally. Do you see statistically, or is it just something we kind of tradition, a rise in DUI crashes, arrests in the holiday months, or is it just something we've always done?
You know, and I think the efforts through law enforcement have kept the crashes and DUIs at a maintenance level throughout the rest of the year. So I can't say that we really see an increase in it, but we have so many extra patrols out there trying to deter it.
Yeah.
So that's our main objective. If that wasn't happening, I don't know what the numbers would be. But just this year alone, we've had, and this is DPS alone, we've had 1,500 DUI-related crashes and 50
Hopefully
DUI.
that's not just in Navajo County.
Not just in Navajo
Okay.
County. That is statewide, just DPS numbers. Thank you for clarifying that. But that's just throughout the year. So, we don't want those numbers to increase, especially during the holiday season.
Yeah. What are some other things? We've talked a lot about the highway safety, and we've joined together. When I say we, Governor's Office of Highway Safety, DPS, and all the other municipalities, working on these kind of high volume, high traffic, high collision areas, whether it be State Route 77, which is kind of the main artery for all of Navajo County, 377, 260. What are we seeing in addition just to DUI? What are some other highway safety concerns that are leading to these more crashes?
So the big thing that we're seeing is, number one, the distracted driving. Everybody by now should know that cell phone use, everything is supposed to be hands-free operation inside the car. We still see a lot of it. We're issuing a lot of citations for it. I would say that right now that is probably the leading factor to a lot of the traffic violations we see, maybe with the exception of speed, all the lane use. Another big one that we have in these two-lane highways is the unsafe passing. People are just getting impatient, and it really doesn't save you a lot of time when you look at it in the end. But the unsafe passing is causing a lot of serious collisions in this area.
So, Captain, when you and I talk a lot about this, we talk about the crash problems throughout the county. You always talk about driver responsibility, much like this DUI enforcement or these holiday prevention messages we put out, is that driver responsibility of planning ahead. What are some other your driver responsibility message that you like to share with the public all the time?
Well, the big thing, and you're right, we have talked about it, and sometimes people are fast to reach out to law enforcement, and with our numbers, there's only so much we can do, and we're doing the best we can. But as I've said, it comes down to driver responsibility. If people would just find a little more patience or a little more courtesy and just leaving a little more space between you and the car in front of you, make sure if you need to pass, make sure there's sufficient room, and don't do it in a no passing zone. Those little things right there would reduce our collision numbers and serious collision numbers in this area a lot. So if people would just be a little more patient.
I think the no passing is one that I've really been focusing on. I know our deputies have spent a lot of time having a no tolerance on that, because I don't know how many roadblocks or crash scenes you and I have spoken, all three of us have spoken at, and it all stemmed from a passing in a no passing zone. Right. Totally preventable type thing, much like this message we're talking about today, drinking and driving. What about drugs, DUI drugs? Tell us a little bit about that. Are we seeing a big rise in that across the state, and what are some concerns in that area?
We're seeing a big increase in the driving under the influence of marijuana. And I've had people tell me before that they weren't worried about it because you don't see the signs and symptoms or smell the alcohol like you do with an alcohol-related DUI. It's important for people to know, and that's a debate for another time, the legalization of marijuana. But it's important for people to know, even with marijuana, you have to be very careful about not driving under the influence. we have increased our numbers, not only our agency, but police departments around the state, of drug recognition experts. The officers and troopers on the roadside are learning more about testing for specific drugs. And if we believe somebody's under the influence of another drug, we'll get a drug recognition expert. They're very good at doing additional tests to the point they can even categorize the drug they're under the influence of. So if anybody has the idea that it's okay to go out and drive under the influence of a drug because we can't detect it, that's no longer the case.
And similar, or in addition to that, if somebody goes out and drinks alcohol, the body eliminates alcohol relatively fast. When a person consumes marijuana, whether it's an edible, smoking, what have you, that marijuana stays in their system significantly longer than alcohol does. So if a person says, hey, I'm going to have a couple of beers, and then they wait 2 hours and they drive a car, they're most likely fine because the alcohol is eliminated out of their system. Marijuana will stick around for at least 16 to 24 hours after the time of use. A drug recognition expert, and many of our officers out on the road, can recognize signs and symptoms of marijuana use clear, 16 to 24 hours after the time of use.
Are they still impaired 16 to 24 hours later, or just have the residue of marijuana, the non-impairing parts of it in their system?
It depends on the person. It depends on the person, their tolerance level, how often they use it. A person that doesn't use it will metabolize it out faster than a person that uses it regularly. And that's where the officer's got to make that judgment call, just very similar to investigating an alcohol impaired individual. Are they seeing signs and symptoms of impairment on them? So that's a hard one, and I know in your office it's very difficult to charge some of these cases because of that. It's not as regiment as it is with alcohol.
Typically we look to see if there's bad driving, or in the field sobriety test there's indications that their reaction time and coordination's impaired in some way.
Correct, yeah.
Because I think juries want to see that for the most part.
Absolutely. But it's just so I want to say unregulated, but there's really not a hard standard like with alcohol yet. And then plus in the marijuana business, you've got edibles with a certain amount of concentration, where you smoke the actual weed may have a little bit less concentration. So it just kind of depends on what exactly they're using.
And probably how much you take.
Exactly.
One edible, half dozen edible, one toke, a whole joint.
If one's good, two's better, right?
Just like one shot or two shots.
Right.
But going back to Captain Sharp's point, the officers now being trained in it, they're recognizing the bad driving and then the impairment, which is leading to the DUI arrest, not just the consumption.
But I also think a key is people who use, which is legal, need to start recognizing themselves if they're impaired. There's too much of word going around that it does not make you impaired, but it does.
It does.
And they just need to recognize it just like a drinker does. Am I impaired or not? Am I safe to drive or not? We're not looking to punish you because you use. We're only looking to make our streets safe if you use and choose to drive.
With alcohol, if you drink a couple of drinks, you can, a lot of times you feel the effects of that. You feel that buzz, if you will, or that euphoric feeling of the intoxicant. With marijuana, you lose that after a certain amount of time. You lose that buzz feeling, if you will, but your body is still impaired. You just don't feel the high. And that's what the scary part is people will use, feel like they've come back to normal, and they think it's okay to drive. In reality, it's not, because it's still there. And that's where it's very hard for the citizens to kind of regulate themselves, because the marijuana stays with you much longer.
Okay. So will you be advertising these wolf packs and other stuff so people know where not to drive and when not to drive and when to stay home and just enjoy their alcohol at home?
Absolutely. We I know at the Sheriff's Office we're going to be pushing that message very soon and very hard. Every weekend, every week, we're going to be pushing out, safety messages regarding the importance of not drinking and driving, and the additional patrols and enforcement methods. We've historically done that for quite a few years, and we still plan on doing that.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for joining us and sharing this message. I know both of you have dedicated your careers to highway safety. It's an issue that affects everybody that travels on the road. And this holiday season, I know appreciate the efforts that the men and women of all of our agencies put into ensuring that everybody has a safe, enjoyable holiday season and gets to their destination safely. And there's going to be a lot of good messages out there. But as much as we say this, we still have those arrests. You can't say it enough that people just sometimes don't think it's going to happen to them, I guess.
Right.
So have a safe holiday season. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, and stay tuned for this month's Most Wanted.
Christopher Ray Parsons has a valid and confirmed felony warrant for probation violation on the original charge of possession of narcotic drugs for sale. Christopher's last known address was Sholo, Arizona. If you have any information on the whereabouts of Christopher, please call Navajo County Communications Center at 928-524-4050, or to remain anonymous, please call We Tip at 1-800-78-CRIME.